Welcome to Based On, an adaptation podcast. I'm Pamela Portnoy. My guest today is Zach Aronson. We'll be talking about Beauty and the Beast, directed by Bill Condon and written for the screen by Chbosky and Evan Spiliotopoulos, which is, of course, based on the 1991 animated film, which was based on a story revision of Madame Gabrielle de Villeneuve. You're right there. Which was based on a story revision by Madame Gabrielle Villeneuve's original tale. Just a fair warning, there will be spoilers. Hi, Zach. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Pam. It's a pleasure to be here.
Just so everyone knows, my intro took almost 5 minutes to do. So Zach's very patient. Hi, Zach.
Hey. I think you did a great job.
That was a mouthful.
It was.
To be honest.
You have Greek names, French names, some English names.
And you speak more French than I do. I speak no French, but I know that you studied French for a long time, so I saw you smirk at my pronunciation.
Oh, no, I wasn't smirking. I was just giving you a thumbs up.
Oh, thank you. Can I hear you say her name?
Gabrielle Suzanne Barbot de Villeneuve.
Fabulous. That's
been a while.
The author of the original tale. It sounded very good.
And what a tale it was.
I know you have thoughts, and I have thoughts. I'm very excited. But before we get into that, my audience is dying to know about your tastes in film and literature. So we're going to start out with a rapid fire quiz.
Let's do it.
Zach, are you ready to adapt?
I'm ready. Adapted.
Question 1. Book before movie or movie before book?
Depends.
Question 2. Happy ending or shocking twist?
Oh, shocking twist.
Most devastating book death?
Oof. That's a toughie. Most devastating book death. Oh, man. I mean, I would say Ned Stark in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
But it was probably something in a kid's book because I forget what the name of the book was, but this guy's dog dies. Oh, Old Yeller. That was the book. No, it was a different book, but Old Yeller, now that we're on the subject, fucking devastating. Can we cuss in this?
Absolutely, we can.
Yeah, I was crushed by Old Yeller.
And you're like a dog lover, and so I imagine you have a hard time watching any like animal death in any film or
film
show.
Book. It's always tough, but you know, it's for the most part Hollywood magic. It's imagined. It's not real. I just kind of keep that mantra playing in my head when I'm watching those really tearjerker moments.
Yeah. Have you seen Call of the Wild?
No, it looks like garbage.
Yeah, I was dragged to see Call of the Wild, and I was in physical agony the entire time.
Yeah, I don't want to sit through that.
They're like they beat the dog.
Yeah, it's like torture porn with animals. Like, I'm not. Come on.
And the person I was with was like, "Are you not aware that like this dog is not a real dog? It's an animated dog?" And I'm like, this dog is created to conjure up feelings of emotion in the audience. Like, of course, I'm still affected.
Look, I still won't watch the episode of Futurama with Fry's dog because it's too like emotionally taxing on me. And that's a show that I've seen like every episode 5 times. So like I intentionally avoid movies like that where I know it's going to be like there's going to be a significant animal death and it's going to be like heart-wrenching. I'm like, it's not what I'm here for.
Yeah, it's too hard. It's too hard. Sometimes I struggle with that more. This is going to make me sound like a terrible person, but I struggle with that more than human death.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know a lot of people who fall into that camp. And because it's always more heart-wrenching when, I mean, save for a few examples, but yeah, it's always, you know, real low-hanging fruit for the director to just tug on our heartstrings. And I also don't like playing into that. So I do avoid those things. It's always, I feel like, you know, embedded in a really sappy movie to begin with. So that gets a big no for me. But
what
yeah,
you doing over there with your mic, Zachary?
Oh, can you hear it? Oh, wow. Sorry, listeners. I'm using like a really fancy mic. It's my first time, so it's apparently.
You guys, it's his first time. This is so exciting.
And I'm really fidgety, so I'm sorry if I make any noises that you that are like in your ears. And
they're in their ears.
Yeah.
This is your first podcast that you've ever been on?
It's the very first.
We're so happy to take your podcast virginity. Welcome.
Thank you.
So rapid fire is never rapid fire. 8 minutes in, we have question 4 to go to now. Favorite fictional couple?
Favorite fictional couple. You can tell that I definitely read these questions and prepared.
That's fine. Our audience is aware. The only person who didn't want to see the questions in advance was Jeremy Edberg.
I'll be honest. I looked at them like 5 minutes ago. Yeah. Favorite fictional couple. Let's see. Probably Billy Chris. Oh, wait, no. Let me take that back. We're going to The Princess Bride. Probably.
Hell yeah.
Wesley and Princess, I think her name's Buttercup.
Yes.
Best couple.
Yeah.
I was going to say Billy Crystal and his old wife in that movie, but I gotta go.
They're awesome.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun to watch. But no, Princess Buttercup and Wesley. That's
a really good choice. You know, I never saw Princess Bride.
It's crazy.
Until you and I reconnected like 10 years ago, and then you told me it was one of your favorites, and so I had to rewatch it, and my God, it was such a good recommendation.
Oh, so good.
It's so good. Favorite film adaptation?
Favorite film adaptation? I mean, I'm going to guess that Jeremy said Lord of the Rings, and I'm going to say Lord of the Rings as well.
I think he said One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, because that's the one he chose. But you're saying Lord of the Rings? I'm sure he threw in
am I
Lord
supposed to say Beauty and the Beast?
No. It took Zach forever to choose what we were going to cover.
I mean, I knew that I wanted to do something in the realm of fairy tales because, you know, the source material is always so much like juicier and darker than, you know, how Disney turns it out.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I'm still going to stick to my guns. I'm going to say Lord of the Rings because those movies are just phenomenal.
They're so good. Least favorite film adaptation?
Least favorite film adaptation. I would say I was pretty disappointed with The Outsider, which is more of a miniseries adaptation, but
it's horror, right? And you just read that.
Yeah, it's horror. And I actually read it in anticipation of the show. And by the time I got to the show, I couldn't get through it because I was like, that's just a hot pile of garbage. So,
who is the author?
Stephen King.
Oh, it's Stephen King. Wow. Okay. Did he just release when did that book come out?
The Outsider came out in 2017.
Okay.
The book. Yeah. And then the show just came out 2020.
But you didn't like it?
I didn't. No. It was okay. I didn't like it. Was not a fan.
Fair.
Yes.
Favorite actor, male or female?
Favorite actor. I would have to say, wow, I feel so put on the spot. Like, I'm not good at rapid fire. I really should have.
You read the questions.
I know. Shame on me. We can edit all this, right?
100, but I kind of don't want to.
No. Favorite actors. I know I have them. I know that I really like, what's his name? He plays Bernard in Westworld. What's his name? Jeffrey Wright.
Yes. Good choice.
I like him a lot. He's great. As far as actresses, I really like Cate Blanchett. She's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a queen.
Yeah, she is the queen. For sure. Favorite fictional universe?
Favorite fictional universe? From any source. It could be a book or a
Totally.
film or a TV.
Totally. This is the question that everyone has trouble with. I used to phrase it as favorite fandom, and everyone's like, what does that mean? Yeah, like what fictional universe do you like to participate in the most?
Probably, I don't know, Jumanji. No, not Jumanji. What's it called? Ferngully. I was gonna say Avatar, but let's go with Ferngully.
Such a throwback to my childhood. I love that.
Do it. I mean, there's little tree nymphs, bats that can talk, insects, rock and roll. You got it all. It was such a moving film for me when I was little, because I love being outside and I love the jungle and animals and all that stuff. So that's one of those really like transportative kind of universes, even though it's just on Earth and they're just shrunk down. But
I'm just like thinking about this now, and it's been a long time since I've seen either film, but do you think that Avatar was inspired a lot by what was going on in Ferngully?
I mean, which was inspired by Dancing with Wolves, which was inspired by, you can like trace those back to probably some original story hundreds of years ago. But yeah, that idea of like, some sort of colonizers coming in or some destructive force, and then one of their ranks going native. I mean, that story is probably it's a tale as old as time.
Wow, you are on fire today. Holy shit. Very good.
This commentary is brought to you by White Claw.
Brought to you by White Claw. Excellent. If you could have drinks, speaking of White Claw, if you could have drinks with any author, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Algernon Blackwood. He is a weird story and horror writer. I'm a big fan of supernatural horror genre, and he is just like, I love his writing, first of all, but he's just such an interesting guy outside of his literary works. I mean, he was in, London's Ghost Club, if your listeners are familiar with that, like super esoteric sort of teachings and followings. And he was part of this really like occult group of thinkers. But I love number one, his writing, like he's a wordsmith. And number two, he was just so fascinating outside of that. So I would love to definitely have a glass of brandy with him and pick his brain.
I like the choice with brandy. Usually people say gin or whiskey.
I get the feeling he was a brandy drinker.
Fabulous. I like that a lot. Favorite book or film quote?
Favorite book or film quote?
How on the spot do you feel now?
So on the spot. And I would say almost any quote from the Hyperion series from a character who's known as the Poet, because number one, he's just such a fascinating character and he swears like a fucking sailor, and almost everything that comes out of his mouth is both like incredibly poetic and also just vulgar as hell. So I could flip through the pages and find you one right now, but I'll leave it up in the air. And if your listeners ever get a chance to take a peek at the Hyperion series, you'll find the Poet is a highly entertaining character.
How vast is that series? How many books is it?
It's 4 books, but the author Dan Simmons actually just came out with sort of an epilogue, like a follow-up book in the same universe. I haven't read it, but yeah, the original 4 series span from like late 80s to the mid 90s.
Do you think I would like it?
Oh, I think you'd love it. Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
It's really like complex, and it's really kind of at points convoluted, but it's also super dense. And if you really like getting immersed in a new type of world and universe building and all that stuff, I think there's a lot that you like about that book or the series.
I'm into it. Very good. We made it through the rapid fire 17 minutes in. We did it.
It doesn't feel so rapid.
It's never rapid.
I guess when you're prepared, it's rapid.
Well, the thing is, even when you're like super prepared, like I think the shortest it's ever been was like 5 or 6 minutes.
Oh, wow. Which is crazy because like this is stuff that I think about like, before bed or just in random like moments of daydreaming, like, what's my favorite quote? And then now, obviously, when I'm, asked to recall that, really a struggle.
It's like the whole, I completely agree with you. It's like when you lose like a pen, you're like, on the daily, I see pens everywhere, but when you're really looking for it, all the pens are fucking gone.
Yeah. You use pens a lot?
Yeah. Do you not?
I mostly type, but I actually used one to jot down some notes for this podcast.
Fabulous.
And it was right where I left it.
Well, you're a little more organized than I am, I'm assuming.
I got a whole cup of them.
What does your cup say? Anything interesting on it?
No, it's actually Rick Sanchez's head from Rick and Morty. It was a Christmas gift.
I love that so much. My mug with my
I'll show
pen.
You. Whoop. There it is.
Oh, it's like a 3D Rick mug.
Yeah, I mean most mugs are 3D.
I love it. Well, no, like it's like pop-up instead of like just a
yes, right. You're right. It's got like features, nose, eyes, hair.
I have my pop-up Hedwig mug right now, and then I saw
that. That's a great piece of dishware. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. And then my other mug says "Caution, hot and literate."
Oh, damn. Does it like say that when you put hot liquid in there?
No, but that would be really cool. I want one of those color changing mugs. That'd be awesome.
At least you didn't get like the not until I've had my coffee cup, because
I definitely have one of those.
All right, retracted.
You're like, I'm done with you now. Zach, I know you have some thoughts. What are your first impressions? And I mean, you mentioned a little bit about why you chose Beauty and the Beast, because you wanted to explore the darker fairy tale. So what are your first impressions of the tale and the adaptation?
Right. So I was kind of inspired to do this because, I studied literature in college. I read all the fairy tales when I was a little kid, and when I took a course on children's lit, we had a whole section on fairy tales, and I was surprised to learn how much like kind of darker and sinister they were compared to, Disney, who is the main body that took on these adaptations. So when I got to reading the source material, I was like, holy shit, like these are tales that would scare the shit out of kids.
This is really like psychologically fucked up, this particular tale.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I'm sure we'll get to this later, but yeah, there's not a whole lot of nuance in the Disney adaptations because they're for kids, which makes me wonder, like, the literature, which was also designated for, kids or at least youth, is way more, like I said, sinister and nuanced. But you have to imagine, like, well, what the fuck was going through? What was happening in these kids' lives where this made it children's lit? I guess it was a reflection of the times. It was probably darker, and life wasn't, shiny and pretty as it is today. And I think, we have to look at both the source material and what we're presented in the 20th and 21st century. It's two totally different bodies of work. And I think it sort of reflects, our society. So one is obviously a lot darker, maybe a reflection of their reality, and one's obviously a lot lighter and more cheerful. And there's quite a few more happy endings in today's body of fairy tales than there were back in the day. So I always found that really fascinating.
Totally.
Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer, but
no, I loved it. I think you're absolutely right. I do think it's interesting because one thing I did notice when I was reading the original tale, Speaking of happy endings, like the that was like a that's what she said moment, but
That's what she said.
that is what she said. Um, I was really taken aback by how every loose end had to be tied up with a little bow.
Are you referring to the second half of the novel being
The second half of the novel, which was a thorough explanation of everyone's backstory. And I was honestly exhausted reading it.
Yeah, as was I. And can I also just point out, like, how literate were kids back in the day? I mean, this book, like, if you know, I come from a teaching background, and you know, we have something called the Lexile level, which basically measures the complexity of a work of literature based on, you know, how complex the words are, the prose, etc. And this was like, I had to, you know, look up a few words in this book, and it was definitely in the higher Lexile level than a lot of the modern literature I read today. But yeah, the second half of the book was just insane. It goes so basically
It went off the rails.
Are we gonna get into this right now? Because
yeah, let's fucking get into it.
It was bonkers. So everything that, you know, your listeners probably know and love about Beauty and the Beast happened in the first half of the book. So everything from, you know, being kidnapped to, you know, opening up and falling in love with the Beast to him being turned back into, spoiler alert, a human happens in the first. I know.
Shocking. Are you kidding me?
Sorry, guys.
I warned them about the spoilers.
You've had 200 years to figure this out.
I'm sure most of you have seen the animated version anyway.
Yeah. So, yeah, basically all that happens in the first half of the book. And I'm reading this on my Kindle, and I thought like maybe there was an issue with, it said I was 50% done. I thought, no, this is the end of the story. Maybe my Kindle's fucked up. And so I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I looked, you know, table of contents. I was at chapter 5. There's 9 chapters. So basically almost the entire second half of the book is just this insanely convoluted and, you know, elaborate story on how this whole realm of fairies, which is completely absent in, you know, most of the film adaptations, this entire realm of fairies has sort of plotted this. It reminded me a lot of, if you've read, you know, the Iliad or the Odyssey, like the gods sort of playing this really intricate role in masterminding the events of the novel. And that's sort of what happens in the second half of this book. And
with good fairies and bad fairies.
Yeah, there's good fairies, there's bad fairies, there's jaded fairies, there's some horny fairies,
some like pedophile fairies.
Yeah, some pedo fairies, and it reminded me so much of the deities in Greek mythology having these sort of like human characteristics. Like, they are flawed, you know, they are not perfect. They want to fuck people, they want power, you know, and there's this whole insane, I would call it a subplot, but it was just more of the dominant plot of the fairies just trying to sort of manipulate the human realm beneath them. And it was really, it was enlightening because I never knew this aspect of the book, but it was also like such a fucking pain to get through.
It really, truly was a pain in the ass to get through the second half. I'm like, really? I didn't need to know this. And I was thinking about it when I was watching the films, like, there's a reason why they're like, we're going to ignore the second half and we're just going to make up a whole nother thing. And we're just going to give it 30 seconds at the top.
Yeah. And actually, while I was reading that, I was thinking of, like, you know, Maleficent and how Disney's taken its live action and they've taken a more in-depth look at the fairy tales. That's not the case with their live action adaptation. It was basically a clone of the animated. But I was thinking, like, wow, this is a lot of material Disney could, if they really wanted to build on this franchise, develop this whole, you know, like a trilogy of the events leading up to it.
Totally.
But I'm glad they didn't. It was just so extraneous, and it was just like, I was thinking, like, why is the author writing this? Like, who the hell wants to know this? Like, just give us the fairy tale and end. But she's like, let me. It was like the Ocean's 11 when they explain, like when they explain like their master plan after it's happened. It was like that, but for 100 pages, and I'm just like, oh my god, like, just kill me.
It totally went off the rails. It was just shocking that it was just as much explanation as to where we got as like the entire tale.
Yeah.
It was just a shocking amount of just world building, but it was very confusing. And
it was almost like listening to like director's commentary while they're so like if you watch a movie and then you watch it again with director's commentary, that was almost what it felt like. You're like, all right, you've just read the book. Now let's explain it from the fairy's perspective in the most minute detail. And there's like incest, there's backstabbing, and it's really like, kind of if it wasn't so long-winded and redundant, it would probably make for a pretty good story itself. But it was almost like Game of Thrones-esque. You have to keep up the fairy lineage, like the order of the fairies, the fairy queen, and then keep in mind in this novel nobody has a proper name, which I was wondering when we would get to this point. Nobody is named. They're named by their titles. Daughter Beauty is named by her characteristics. We never learn her real name.
Yeah.
The Beast, Prince. So you have to keep up with all these like fairies by queen of this, queen of that, queen of the seasons.
Yeah, by their class ranking, which is like such a huge thing because it turns out like the whole problem was like Beauty, and in the movies, Belle, obviously, was a peasant's daughter. But then they're like, no, wait, she is actually the Beast's cousin.
Yeah, so
and she is a princess.
She's and not only a princess and the Beast's cousin, but she's half fairy.
She's half fairy, half royalty.
So after she awakens the Beast from his spell, the fairy and the queen, the Beast's mom, came and explained all this to Belle and the prince, who were just like, what the fuck is going on? Like, they're like, she's like, hold my chalice. Let me tell you this. Let me take you back 20 years. And it's just this insanely winding story. It felt honestly like reading a separate book.
Yeah. That I didn't really feel the need to read.
No. And I actually just watched the live action Beauty and the Beast.
For the first time, right?
Yeah, for the very first time. And because I really liked the animated 1991 film growing up. And this felt like kind of a slave to the original, but I also like that they had some sort of throwbacks to the original story from Villeneuve. And
100% they did.
Yeah. So there's a lot of differences. I don't know if we're going to go into the minutia.
We can.
I don't know.
Let's go.
Are we going to do like a side by side?
We can. I took some notes like with what you're saying. I think Emma Watson's first of all, Emma Watson as Belle. I'm a fan. Are you a fan?
I was a fan. I like Emma Watson a lot. And I was probably most surprised to learn that she did the singing.
Yeah.
Because at the very first opening song, Little Town, I was like, who the fuck is singing? This is not Emma Watson. So I had to Google it right away. And lo and behold, Emma Watson is singing all of the singing parts. They might have done like a dub for the final product as opposed to singing on mic.
Yeah.
But I was impressed because it didn't sound like her.
Did you think they pulled like a Eurovision, what they did with Rachel McAdams?
What did they do there? I've only seen bits
did you see it? So in the final song, like it's epic. Like, she hits some notes that are just out of control, and it's such a beautiful song. And Rachel does sing a good chunk of it, but what they do is that they meld her voice and that of a Swedish singer, which I'm forgetting her name right now, for the final product.
No, I didn't know
It's
that.
not entirely her.
I figured there was some Hollywood magic behind Emma Watson's voice, but as far as I know, it was 100% her.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, she was. I mean, she was amazing. Everyone, I think, used their actual singing voice.
Yeah, it was fabulous. But what I was gonna say is her character has a line, and I think I wrote it down here. It said, "I'm not a princess." Nonsense, which I don't think she says in the animated version. Yeah, talking about minutia,
Okay.
which is a total throw in for the fairy tale, because she is absolutely a princess in the fairy tale.
She's like more than a princess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if we're comparing the film, the live action to the source material, I think it's also fair to compare it to the Disney animated film.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a few spots, not a whole lot, where it really takes some creative license. There are a couple original numbers. That's fine because it's a 2-hour movie. The animated is probably 120.
Yeah, it's like 120 something, 130 something. I actually watched both last night. I had a marathon yesterday.
I just imagine you and you're like Beauty and the Beast dress. You're holding the magic enchanted mirror.
You're rude. I used to dress up as Belle when I was a kid.
Oh yeah. I mean, my sister had the Belle dress, the enchanted mirror. You pressed a button and it actually showed you your wildest dreams. It was crazy. They really went all out. Yeah. No, it obviously didn't. But I like that they
very good.
But yeah, a few things that I noticed about this recent live action adaptation. I mean, first of all, on its surface, it's almost identical to the animated, just from like a storyboard perspective. The choreography, everything. I think they did a great job. Costumes, the set pieces were all pretty stunning. You could tell they didn't really spare any expense when it came to that. But and I have this problem with a lot of adaptations, or this criticism rather, is that you kind of lose some of the magic when you are adapting from either 3D animation, cell animation to live action. I think you lose a little bit of that magic because you're constricted by the laws of physics for one, and I think there's something subconscious going on too. You get a lot of like exaggerations in animation that really just don't translate well to live action. But I think that was the case at a few points with this film, but also the subtext of this film was pretty radically different. Belle's always been this pretty, stalwart heroine as far as the Disney princesses go. She's brave, she's smart, she's got all these qualities that you look for in, a traditional male hero. And they don't draw a whole lot of attention on the fact that she's female, other than that, like, okay, she's weird. Like, Belle's fucking weird. She reads, what the hell? And, she's intrepid, she's brave, she's courageous. They really double down on that in this Disney adaptation. It's a lot more progressive, I think, and not in a force down your throat kind of way, but there's certainly, lines that they added in to really emphasize, like, hey, I'm a woman and I'm doing this stuff and I don't need no man.
Totally. One particular difference I noticed when it came to that was her helping, like, they escape on their own. Her and her dad escape from the like loony bin carriage.
Yeah.
On their own instead of being saved by Chip.
That's right. Chip saves them. Oh, because you don't need a man, even
a little boy made it as a teacup. I'm dead.
Yeah. Right. And I was fine with that. It felt really like, on the nose, but I also try to keep in mind when I'm watching adaptations, especially of, these cherished films from our childhood, that, it's for a new generation. It's not for me.
Yeah.
So there's a little subtlety that's lost in some of these things. And I would say that, the progressivism in this one is one of those things that's really kind of brought to the fore. And you don't really have a chance to figure it out on your own. Also, there's, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Josh Gad's openly homosexual character of Lefou.
Yeah.
Pining after Gaston, which I think I read was Gad's choice. He wanted to portray Lefou as gay, and I was like, this kind of makes sense because Lefou's like a total lackey of Gaston's in the original, and you're like
100%.
Fuck, and you're like, this makes total sense. So that was like a logical change that they made, because he's totally on Gaston's nuts, like every like you can tell. And I thought that was really clever. And
it was a smart choice. So interesting. And I really felt it like towards the end that he really changed sides, and I felt it more in the live action than I did in the animated version.
Yeah, I don't know if Lefou even changes in the animated version. By the way, I feel like we should mention there's no Gaston. There
Lefou. Is no Gaston. Gaston in the movies represents the male suitors and the brothers. Because Beauty, or Belle, whatever you want to call her, she has 3 sisters in the original tale and 3 brothers.
5 sisters and
5 sisters.
Brothers.
Sorry, it's 5. Is it? Isn't it 6 and 6, or is it 5 and 6?
It's 5 and 5. She's got 5 brothers and 5 sisters in the original tale. Because she's
actually not a part of the family.
Right.
Which is, okay, got it.
And so yes,
forgive my confusion. It's a very convoluted tale, but basically, Gaston represents the brothers, because in the tale, the brothers offer to go kill the beast because they wanted to, avenge, their sister being taken and their dad being taken. And Belle also has a ton of suitors that were originally going after her sisters. And the sisters are like jealous bitches, which are also not represented in the films, except by the 3 maidens in the town.
Right. And those are the same in both adaptations, animated and live action.
Yes.
We don't get a whole lot of, so I would say we don't get a whole lot of town action, because in the novel there is no town. Belle comes from humble, well, let's see. She sort of has a riches to rags to riches story in the novel. So her dad's this wealthy merchant. Long story short, he has like a fleet carrying a bunch of cargo that, I don't know, gets lost in a storm and turns up later, but he loses everything. So they're, high society in Paris. He loses all his money, and he has to move into the countryside where, the sisters, who are just like fucking so jealous of Belle because she's humble and they're all very materialistic. They kind of rebel against moving to the country and living the simple life. The brothers are like, whatever, we're chill. Belle's like, as long as we're all happy and healthy. And her sisters kind of resent her for her humble nature and charisma. But yeah, there is no town in the original. So they're just kind of living there. No one's really afraid of the beast because no one knows about him. So we bring in Gaston and the town in both adaptations, and they sort of represent, like, this wild provincial kind of really narrow-minded lifestyle that Belle feels like an outsider in. And eventually this leads them to fear the unknown. And they really double down on that, I think, in the live action adaptation, as maybe a reflection of politics or our social climate. They really, as soon as they hear the word the beast, they're just like, oh, fuck no, pitchforks and torches, and let's go kill this guy. and I think someone like expressly states like, we don't know him, let's kill him. Or like
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously at the head of that, you have Gaston stoking all these fears. And that was the same. But yeah, shocker. No Gaston, no Lefou, almost nobody in the original tale from the town.
Because the only conflict really in the original tale is the fact that the beast is in his current form and that he wants to be transformed into like his former, you know, to his former glory, and like the love story between him and Belle. But for like a film, for the purposes of a film, they needed a bad guy.
Yeah, you do need a bad guy.
And God, I forgot how much of an asshole Gaston is. They
like,
really built a bad guy. And I could hear Jeremy.
Oh, can you? Should I turn my gain down?
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I was watching the animated version last night, and I was cringing at Gaston, because one thing they didn't do in the live action is Gaston sets up a fucking wedding between him and Belle before he even proposes to her, and it's outside, and he comes in, he's like, let's go outside and get married, and she's like, get the fuck out of my house. But they don't do that in the live action, and I was just appalled. I'm like, oh my God, I would watch this all the time as a kid, and this is so disturbing.
It's crazy. He would definitely get Me Too'd this day and age.
2 seconds.
In 2 seconds, yeah. He was always like kind of one of my favorite villains that I love to hate, because he is just like the epitome of like a fucking knuckle dragging, toxic, masculine, just bastard. And everything he does is just like so over the top. You know, he just like shoots a duck right in front of Belle to impress her. He's like, look at how lethal I am with a gun, and look at how strong I am. And he's basically the straw man when it comes down to it. But
he throws her book in the mud, steps on her books. It's out of control. It
is. He's got no respect for literature. We don't even know if he's literate, as it turns out in the live action. Most people aren't. And right. This is where Belle gets chastised for teaching a girl how to read, and the town just loses its shit.
Yeah. Fucking crazy.
It is crazy. But can I just say, Luke Evans, like, such a good job as Gaston.
Oh my God. He was honestly brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, I love him. He's a great actor, and he really brings Gaston to life, like both in appearance and demeanor. And he kind of stole the scene every time he was on screen.
I found something interesting about the live action. They added a lot of scenes that kind of built the relationship between Belle and the Beast that they didn't originally have in the animated version. Oh. And it was mainly like talking about the literature. Like they had that conversation of like, of course you like Romeo and Juliet, and then he's talking about like King Arthur and then Knights of the Round Table. And I actually really like that because it felt like their relationship was more earned.
Right.
Because you got to see them, you know, fall in love more and like fall in love with their minds, which in the tale, they call him dumb, which drove me crazy.
Well, no, that was a stipulation of his curse, is that whenever he spoke, he had to come across as dumb, lest he reveal himself and his, you know, royal origins. At first I thought I'm like, wait, did she fucking dumb this guy down when she put the curse on him? And then later, in this really convoluted, you know, explaining of the whole thing, they're like, yeah, you're not allowed to talk too good. Because you gotta not only are you gonna look like a horrible creature, but you also have to talk dumb and get a girl to fall in love with you on top of that. So that's why he kind of restricts himself to speaking, you know, 4 or 5 lines every day to her for a few minutes at a time.
Which I think like creates an interesting conversation about what it takes for someone to actually fall in love with another human being, because back in the, like, I don't know what year was the original tale.
This is in like
written?
the 1600s, 1700s.
Right. And so there's a lot of talk about duty and about honor and integrity, and like Belle keeping her word by staying with the beast. And I feel like her falling in love with the beast is more her like respecting him and like coming to care for him, rather, because they don't have like deep conversations in the tale.
No,
like
not at all.
they just like have like an exchange of 4 sentences every night. How's your health? What'd you do today? Will you marry me?
It's like, yeah, it's like they've already been married for like 50 years, and the conversation is now reduced to, how was your day? You feeling okay? All right, I'm gonna go to bed. But instead of the last part, he asks, he proposes to her.
Yeah, every night. And it's like, how does that enable her to fall in love with him?
So,
but maybe the standards were different back then when it came to like marrying someone.
Oh, I mean, I think even if you look back 30 years, standards were a little different. It was more of and they tap into this a lot in the book, which is lacking in, I think, both adaptations. But Belle's virtue is something that they really bring to the fore, and her virtue is sort of her loyalty to the beast, to herself, to her family. She's kind of doing this out of regard for her family's well-being. She's like, I'll take the beast, or I'll take my dad's place. I'll stay with this fucking asshole who kidnapped me, so my dad can live. And then throughout the novel, even as she's getting, she's learning to live in the castle, and she's finding some, modicum of happiness, she's always like, I'm doing this for the good of my family. Yeah, the beast has some, redeemable qualities, but they always prize her honesty and virtue above her maybe more progressive feminine tendencies, as they do in the animated and live action adaptations. But I always thought that was really interesting, because another thing that's lacking from the film adaptations is the appearance of the prince in his original form in her dreams. So she...
Yes.
So she falls in love.
Hand holding.
Oh my god! Like, there had to be some fucking masturbating going on in that castle. Like, there's no way. I mean, you could. I mean, if someone took a pen to this original work, they could turn it easily into an erotica novel, because there's not only is she just in the castle for months dreaming about the prince, literally dreaming about him, and having these strolls through the garden and romantic conversations, and she's
full out in love with this guy.
She's got a raging boner. Yeah. She did. And you later learn that there are, as there's an evil enchantress, there's also a good enchantress, almost like a fairy godmother, who is working with the beast to break the spell. And she's like, I got an idea. You're not allowed to tell Belle who you are. That's part of the stipulation of the curse. Why don't we shove you into her dreams as the handsome prince you once were, get her to fall in love with you there. And this doesn't backfire, but it's so confusing to Belle, because she's like, wait, I wake up, I see the portrait, I have this bracelet with the same man that I'm seeing in my dreams. He obviously, has something to do with this castle. Who the fuck is this? No one's allowed to tell her who it is, because that would, ruin the beast's chance of returning to normal. But she's like, man, I'm so in love with this guy. While at the same time, it's just like an epic case of friend zoning. She's like, yeah, the beast is noble. Like, he treats me to anything my heart desires materially. He's good to my family. He gives them riches. But I really have the hots for the prince. And
he must be, trapped in this castle somewhere. Yeah.
She comes to that conclusion, and she's not wrong technically, but she's a little slow on the uptake. She's a little bit. Because even in the dreams, like, the prince is like, you love the beast. She's like, yeah. He's like, what would you do if I killed him? She'd be like, no, don't do that. Like, I sacrificed my life for him. He's like, oh, well, then you love him. She's like, yeah, but I have the hots for you. So Belle's like conflicted. She's like, I love both these guys. One is a friend. One is a guy I'd fuck.
And they're telling her, don't let looks deceive you.
Yeah, it's like, how dense can you be? So I guess one of her virtues is not reading subtext. But other than that, she's wise and virtuous for her age. And that's something that, they go on and on about, except she's just never quite able to put two and two together, that the prince and the beast are one and the same.
Right. Which is what I like more about the modern version, is that they actually have like a mental emotional connection.
I like that too. And what kind of surprised me about the book is like the beast isn't actually a dick. Like, other than kidnapping her dad and then, Belle in his place, from the get-go, like, he doesn't have any temper tantrums like the beast in the adaptations. He doesn't, destroy his castle. He's just like, well, I gotta go out there, I gotta be nice to her and play dumb, and this is the game for the next few months. This is the and I think I like that element about the adaptations a lot better, is that they set up a problem. Well, we don't want to make him a dum-dum on top of being ugly. Let's make him kind of an asshole, and he's gonna have to learn to cool his jets when he's around Belle and be a gentleman. And that's just something that doesn't happen in the books, but it gives it a lot more of a sort of a human appearance.
100%. Like, everything he did in the tale was more for like her entertainment.
Yeah.
And he was way more flawed. And I feel like it almost went too far, because my whole impression of the beast, at least since I've become an adult, has been, oh, like, this is an abusive relationship.
It is, yeah. I mean, well, when you kidnap anyone, like, no matter how nice you are to them, it's you're abusing them in one way or another. But the other thing was like, he is very limited. His tool bag is like really limited, what he can do to woo her over to break the spell. He's not allowed to tell her who he is. He's not allowed to speak, eloquently. So it's really tough for him to connect with her. And in the book, he ends up, just giving her nice things. And the castle, I think, is maybe, I don't know, it's a little bit more enchanted. Belle can basically watch TV in there. She gets like, gold, fine dining, all this stuff that her heart desires. Literally.
All the like people who were like attending her in the palace were actually like animals. Like,
yeah, they were genies.
Right,
genies. As animals.
And the furniture was not animated. The people that worked in the castle were statues, and they had no idea what was going on.
Right. So the good enchantress, to prevent the word getting out about the beast, basically turns all of the beast's retinue into, and all the people in the castle's court into statue, because they might snitch, and that would ruin the beast's chance. Because like the evil fairy really laid down the law. She's like, you're not allowed to tell anyone. You have to act dumb, and you're going to look ugly. And you have to get someone to fall in love with you. And if anyone learns about your true identity, you're donezo.
And in case we didn't make it clear enough, this all happened because he rejected her.
Oh, yeah. No. And
he wasn't a selfish asshole like they make him out to be in the films.
No, he was a valiant and loyal son. And
he just didn't want the fairy.
Right. So, again, the adaptations really try to bring it back down to earth and ground it in reality. And, not reality, but they try to humanize it. Really, everyone in this book are just kind of victims of these fairies' fucking games. Like, there's this whole drama.
Ego.
Yeah. The fairies are just kind of just fucking it up for everyone in the book. But, yeah, it's really more of a tale about vanity, not that the adaptations aren't, but these fairies' egos just, and their laws, which are clearly flawed, really just set this whole unfortunate scene in motion, and you really learn to hate these fairies.
One of
Some
the
of
things
them.
that I wanted to talk to you about was I don't know what we should call it, because there is the Enchanted Mirror that everyone knows, that it's in both the live action and the animated version. But it's not so much in the tale. What's in the tale is, what are we going to call it? Like a mirror, or not, like a window, or like
Yeah.
a looking glass sort of situation.
These are the things that are referred to as TVs earlier, because essentially they look like four windows in this room, except when Belle taps on them, it shows her any scene around the world. So she watches French comedies in the theater. She gets to see people, walking about Paris. She can literally go anywhere in the world to see what people are doing.
That's not in the animated version, but it is in the live action, which I love they included, because it did help with their relationship a lot.
Yes. And yeah, going back to their relationship, basically he has to woo her over with material things and, fine dining in, in the book. And that never really gets to Belle. She's like, all right, he's not killing me and molesting me. But I still don't, he's treating me kindly for all intents and purposes. But he really has to woo her over with material things. And in the book, or I'm sorry, in the film, they come to more of a mutual appreciation of each other through like, hey, he's actually got a sensitive side. He likes to read. We both have that going for us. We're both kind of outsiders in our respective worlds. And that's really where they find this kind of mutual connection, which is much more human than saying like, hey, how are you doing? How is your health? Here's some good food. Here, give your dad some gold and your sister some jewels. She's like, not a bad guy.
I could marry him.
I can marry him, yeah. She's like, yeah. Oh, by the way, the beast is fucking loaded. Like, his castle, it takes her, I think, a few days to explore every nook and cranny of it. And he's just like, I think there's a little bit more magic in the book version, because as we come to figure out later, there's invisible genies and the enchantress, the good enchantress, watching over the castle, but who hide themselves kind of from Belle. But he's just got jewels, he's got gold, he's got all this stuff
full of jewels and gold and clothes and things that he would just be like, yeah, you could just fill up your trunks, take them to your family.
Yeah, she's like, I miss my dad. He's like, don't worry about that. Just give him 2 trunks full of gold and,
he'll be fine.
It's good. But eventually, yeah, she gets homesick. The beast sees her weeping. She's like, I gotta go home for like 2 months.
I need summer vacation.
He's like, look, I love you, so I'm gonna let you. I'm just gonna let you know right here and now. If you do that, I'm
die.
Dead. Yeah, I'm gonna die. But that's sort of the same. In the films, her dad Maurice is in trouble. Belle has to go save him from the angry townsfolk who were trying to lock him up. And by the way, you have Gaston totally gaslighting Maurice in the live action. He's like, what'd you
both of them?
Yeah, both of them. Like, Maurice is, he's eccentric, but he's not a lunatic. And Gaston really is like, look, whose word are you going to take? Me, big buff guy, or this weird kook whose daughter reads, like Maurice.
Just a troublemaker who reads.
Yeah. Can't have that in society. And everyone's already like against this family. So it wasn't very difficult for Gaston to manipulate them. But yeah, in the book, she's just like, I miss my family. Give me 2 months. She does that. Her brothers, her sisters, no matter how kind Belle is to her sisters, geez, they just suck. They're like the epitome.
The more kind she is to her sisters, the more they suck.
Yeah, they are haughty, jealous hoes. They don't like her. Like, and
Very thoughtful.
no, and you get it too, because when Belle comes back, all the suitors who are trying to get with the sisters are just like, oh, bye, your sister's in town, bye bye, and they all try to court Belle, and the sisters just hate her. You know, they're just so jealous. The brothers are just like, oh, we're so glad to have you back. They're kind of out of the picture for the most part. They're just there as like this sort of, hey, they're like a prop. They're like, hey, remember you got brothers too. And it's really just, I don't know what it was about the times or maybe the author, but she really painted a pretty ugly picture of these sisters who just like, they're like, oh, we're so happy that she's locked up. When she comes back, they're like, you need to get out of here. You're ruining our chances of getting laid.
Totally. And I'm just thinking about how she painted the picture of the men, because in the films, it really feels like Belle kind of shoved her dad out of the equation. Like, she selflessly saves him. And yeah, she does in the tale, but in the tale, the dad comes off more of as an asshole, because he like tells her his problem, because he's never like trapped in the castle. He goes home and he's like, guys, here's the situation. I have to go back to this castle because I picked his roses. Unless like one of you like fucking takes my place.
Oh, yeah. And this is something that...
And she's like, okay, I'll take your place. But in the movie, she forces her dad out. She pushes him out of the fucking cell.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to fairy tales from, 200-300 years ago for logic, like, you're in the wrong place. Like, so many of these things are just so illogical. Like, the character motives are just like, what the fuck? Why did you do that? And this is no exception. So, like, yeah, more the dad, who, again, there's no name, so he's not Maurice in the book. He's like, okay, he's displaced from a storm. He goes into the castle. There's this magnificent meal that we later find out was intentionally set up for him. He feeds, waters the horse. He eats his meal, takes a nap. He's on his way, picks a rose, and then, obviously this sets the whole kidnapping thing in motion. So you picked a rose, you ungrateful asshole. Like, I just fed you. You just took, like, a nice cloak, and I gave you a horse. Or I fed your horse, but you can't take a flower. And I like how they poke fun of that in the live action. He's like, I guess this is the price you pay for picking a flower. Yeah. Obviously, there's more significance to it than that later, as we find out later. But he's like, but before I let you go, why don't you come in and eat dinner again, spend the night, eat breakfast? And I was like, this is psycho. Like, he's like, I'm going to basically keep you here forever, unless you bring me one of your daughters. And she has to willingly consent to come out here. But before you go get her, spend the night again. Like,
take some jewels,
take a load off, eat some breakfast. I got a horse ready for you in the morning. I want you to feel good when you're heading out. I want you to be in good health. And the dad's just like, what the? Like, the dad's like, all right, he's hungry. He's like, all right, I'll eat this nice meal you laid out for me. But yeah, it was crazy. And then he's like, you got to be back in a month. You're an honest man. I'm going to hold you to your word. And he's like, yeah, I'll be back. It's like, all right, good. Because if you don't, I'll find you. And you're just like, what the? Like, get out of there, dude. Like, run away. So that part was just like, you couldn't pull that off if you wanted to in a movie. Because he's basically, this is what all they had back then was their word. So he's like, you're an honest man. I've got your word. You're going to come back here to sacrifice your daughter in a month's time. Because that's what he believes he's doing, is bringing his daughter back to be devoured. And Belle really just pisses off her sisters when she accepts that proposal. She's like, well, Papa, if it saves you, I'll gladly lay down my life, and so you can take care of the rest of the family. And she's like 16, and the sisters are just like, this bitch.
And they're like, oh, she's so selfless. She's doing this for us.
Yeah.
That's like the only time they're nice to her, is like when she's like, oh, I'll get eaten by this beast for you guys.
For you guys, yeah. And it's just like, it's remarkable, she does all this, and she's almost like too selfless, to the point where you're like, she's like, I want everyone to be happy, and if my demise means guarantees everyone's happiness, I'll gladly die. And you're like, dude, like, stand up for yourself, have a little bit more agency. which is something that they definitely gave Belle in the films, which I appreciated, because she's almost just like too humble, too sanctimonious in the books, where she's just like, I don't want to offend the beast, but I also want to save my dad, and I'm just here as, sort of a tool for, or a bargaining chip for both parties' satisfaction. And I like that she kind of takes the lead in the films a little more.
I agree. Fabulous. Were there any other changes that drew your attention?
Not, I mean, I'm trying to think of, other than the massive elephant in the room of the fairy's tale, not a whole lot other than what we've covered. Let's see.
What's interesting
so
about
here's
that?
So going back to the progressive angle that the live adaptation took, there were a few notes that I took between that and the animated, which is definitely kind of got a down with the patriarchy vibe to it, which is I'm all for that. And again, this is a film for a young audience, and they got to be kind of on the nose with some of these things. So in the original animated, Belle is a lot more like, I want to get out of this provincial town. People are closed-minded. In the live adaptation, it's a little bit more, I want to get out of this provincial and patriarchal town, which is dominated by men. That was a lot more evident. And here's something I found interesting between the two film adaptations. In the animated, you don't know really dick about the beast's background, other than he was sort of a spoiled brat and kind of a narcissist. And then they sort of build on his character in the live adaptation by just briefly mentioning that it's his dad's fault that he kind of turned out the way he did. So again, another little jab at the patriarchy. You learn that the beast's, or the prince's mother, dies when he's young, and his dad kind of takes over his parentage and kind of twists him into this sort of pompous kind of asshole prince that we see at the opening of the film, when he gets turned into the beast. And so that was kind of interesting. Was it necessary? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think so either.
It sort of stood out to me as being sort of another kind of jab at a patriarchy.
100%. Which,
again, fine by me. It's just an observation, but I can't tell right now. I'm still, out on whether or not that was effective.
I was also thinking about how in the live action version, the library in the town is literally 5 or 6 books. And in the animated version, it's actually it's a small library, but it could be considered a library. And so I think they were really just trying to hit us on the head with, nobody here reads. Everyone's against, women being educated. Like you mentioned before, in the animated version, she doesn't read to a kid and then get chastised for it. You're right. It really is more progressive with the live action.
And I would also say that that's sort of whether you want to call it a backlash or a reflection of our times. I think that's sort of what influenced all those moments in the movie of Belle really being, number one, chastised for being smart and independent, and also these instances of the town just being really anti-intellectual and really against, really having these conservative values and old-fashioned values, and that was a lot more apparent in the film, the live action, than it was in the animated. Of course, almost none of this stuff exists in the fairy tale itself. It's more of, be virtuous, don't judge a book by its cover. That was sort of the simple moral of the fairy tale, and the film was a bit more politically charged and nuanced at the same time. But it also gives it that element of humanity and familiarity. If you were to go back and read the source material like we did, you'd be kind of questioning a lot of the character motives. At least I was. And, what does this say about society's values or, estimations of women or men for that matter at the time? And what is kind of surprising is that there's a lot of really virtuous, noble male characters in the fairy tale. And they sort of get punished for being noble and virtuous, and that's something that was completely absent. There's very few redeemable characters other than the Beast and Belle's father in the film adaptation. So I think it's just a reflection of the changing times. I say changing, like, it's recent. This is 200 plus years ago.
Yes.
But it was fun to sort of hold both of these works of fiction up and say, like, oh, this is what was sort of relevant at the time in the late 1600s. This is what was relevant in the 90s, and this is now what's relevant in 2017.
Do you feel different about the story now that you've read the source material?
Yeah, I'm way more appreciative of the films because...
Which is so rare with an adaptation, because usually people hate the film versions, but honestly, the film versions are way better than the original.
Oh yeah, they've got depth, and even for kids movies, they've got way more depth and nuance than the original source material did. And again, I don't know if it's hard to get into the author's head and know who her intended audience was at the time and what sort of statement she was trying to make. But on its surface, you look at fairy tales, and this is sort of a through line in a lot of fairy tales, is just the choices are less about, like, thinking clearly and more to advance the plot. Like, why the fuck did Red Riding Hood not see a wolf in her grandma's clothes? And, these are things that we kind of laugh at now, but obviously they're more to advance a moral of a story. But that when you bring to life, and especially today's day and age, seem really implausible and illogical. But I sort of give that, these fairy tales the benefit of the doubt there, and I'm willing to make some suspension of disbelief. And to be honest, I did enjoy the novel up until the fairies' explanation of the book I just read. But I still am going to have to stick to my guns and say that the 1991 animation is my favorite, hands down.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The animation is classic. It's iconic, and I actually really enjoyed the live action version of this one. But I think it was trying very hard to be the replica of the animated one with a few additions. One thing that caught my eye, first of all, it makes me very happy that we actually like the films better.
Yes.
That makes me very, very happy, because that's so rare. I think I only felt that way about Girl Interrupted so far in the books that I've tackled. But there was one iconic scene. I don't know why it affected me so much as a child, but in the animated version, I remember, what are those? It's not towers. It's like the part of the roof that's like a cone. Is it a turret? What do they call it?
It is called a spire, I think.
Okay, the spires. So when the beast is like climbing the spires and the tiles are like coming off, in the animated version, to me that like really stuck in my head, and that was so iconic. And so when I was watching the live action version, and they like kept it almost shot by shot, with him like climbing on the roof. I don't know why that like stuck with me so much. And I was watching the live action, I'm like, oh my God, this is like iconic. To me, that's as iconic as like Belle's dress. They really did a great job.
They did. They did a good job of translating it from, the cell animation to live action. Again, like, I'm in the camp where I think it's really hard to translate, animation to live action without losing some of the magic. And I still feel that way. And at points, the live action felt like kind of a slave to the animation. But if you're talking about, cloning it, they did a really good job of getting certain scenes just shot for shot. But now that you touched on that, the climactic battle, I was a little bit underwhelmed in the live action. Number one,
Really?
yeah. Number one, Gaston uses a fucking gun.
I was so pissed. Instead of it, he uses a dagger,
Well,
and he uses pieces of the building too in
yeah, he
the
does that,
cartoon,
but he
right?
also has like a crossbow that he never uses. But in
Yeah.
the animated, I'm pretty sure he shoots him with an arrow and he stabs him. And I don't think I liked his demise wasn't as satisfying in the live action. He just kind of shoots the beast and then he's a dumbass for standing on a crumbling bridge and he dies. And in the
Yeah.
animated, he like obviously he begs for his life. The beast is like, "I'll let you live," and then he like stabs the beast in the back, literally. And then the beast is like, "Ah," and he, inadvertently flings him off to his death, which was a lot
And
more satisfying to watch than him just, falling off a crumbling bridge because he's too stupid to move.
it is interesting with the animated because there are a lot of times where, because I think the actors in this are phenomenal, so I'm not saying this to downplay my God, what is the actor's name? Dan Stevens's performance, because it's phenomenal. But a lot of the time, the animated are better than the live action, and I noticed this particularly with Lion King, because you can animate, these animals and beasts to have a lot of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that really caught my eye in that scene with Gaston and the Beast was in the animated version, the Beast is so heartbroken that he's just like, bitch, just kill me. Like, just fucking shoot me. Put me out of my fucking misery. She's gone.
Yeah.
And it's less so in the live action. But what I did like about the live action was that he has this great line, and I don't know how you felt about this. He has this great line of, "I am no beast."
Oh yeah, I like that. I did like that.
That was good.
That was one of the things that I thought really embellished that final act. I am no beast. And he just fucking smacks him down like the bitch he is.
Yeah.
Because Gaston, like he's one of those like Disney villains that you just love to hate. And they do Disney just in general does a good job of making really loathsome villains. But yeah, I didn't. Again, going back to animating, any CGI figure, whether it's Lion King or any of the new live, quote unquote live action adaptations, there is that element of the uncanny valley where it's like you can animate the features on, a CGI rendition as well as you like, but there's still something that just doesn't hit you quite right, maybe subconsciously or consciously, that you get from watching the animation. And maybe that's because the expressions are bigger, it's much larger than life, and it's hard to really bring that larger than life element to a 3D physical reality without screwing something up somewhere. And for the most part, I think they did a good job capturing Dan Steve. I'm sure they had him on like a motion capture, in a motion caption suit, and they did a good job capturing his emotions. But still, it was just like still a little weird to watch. Him smiling, him getting sad, without feeling like a little squirmy inside, because it's so hard to replace the animated beast from the 1991 film with this kind of CGI Frankenstein.
Yeah, who's like very buff. He's got like man body.
The beast in this one?
The live action, yeah.
Yeah, he's not quite as like lion-like or bear-like or hunched over as he is in the animated. He like when he's Belle's tending to his wounds, he's like, you just look like kind of a hairy guy.
Yeah. How did you feel about it when she says, "How do you feel about growing a beard?"
Oh, that took me out of it for a second.
Really?
That did. I was like, oh, come on.
I started like diving down the rabbit hole of like, okay, so she was attracted to him, maybe partially, and is that weird or is it not weird?
Well, and here's the thing, because in the fairy tale, once she frees him of the spell, he's back to his human form. That's not the final hurdle. The queen his mother and the enchantress who, kind of guided him to salvation, both have to agree that Belle's the right woman for him. And the enchantress is like, look, there's no better girl you're going to find than Belle. She's full of virtue. She's beautiful, etc. The queen's like, yeah, but she's like from a fucking merchant, bloodline. We don't want her with my son. And the son's like,
no fucking sense, because she hasn't seen her son in how many years, and he's been frozen as this beast. And I'm like, bitch, you're gonna take issue with the fact that she's a quote unquote commoner? Like,
yeah, she has a physically recoils when Belle's like, or she's like, Belle, who are your parents? She's like, oh, I'm just a merchant. And she like physically, like she was hugging her. She disengages and like recoil. She's like, who the fuck did you say? A merchant. And then the prince is like, well, look, if I can't have her as I am, I will gladly revert back to the beast. And I thought that was really a touching moment in the book. And that sort of sets them up for this huge, shocking revelation on the part of the enchantress, where she's like, well, let me tell you a little something. Belle's actually not a commoner. She's not only royalty, but she's got fucking fairy blood. And the queen's like, oh, I love you again.
Yeah, that was like a lot for me. I'm like, this awful thing happened. Finally, like this 1 in a million chance girl with like this open heart comes, fixes the situation, undoes the magic, and now you take issue with her. Yeah, what are you doing?
Oh man, you really want to just like shake her, like throttle her. Like, what? Do you know how hard it was to get your son back to normal? And he's and the son's even like, yeah, I'll go back to the beast as long as I can be with Belle. And she's like, fine with me. Like, I'll take you either way. And then you sympathize a little bit more with the queen once you learn her backstory, again, in this whole almost a separate book. When you learn the lore of and the origin of the beast and the fairy war and all that nonsense. But yeah, in the live action, I was like, when she asked him to grow a beard, I'm like, does she kind of prefer the beast to the new prince?
That was a very like thought-provoking moment. I was like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah, it was a little wink at the audience. Haha.
Yeah.
Also, at the times, guys with beards.
Guys with beards, man.
Guys with beards. Can also say that I loved all the furniture, like, Ian McKellen, Ewan McGregor, everyone who played
Stanley Tucci.
I
love me some Stanley Tucci.
I love when he like gets transformed back and he's toothless, and you're like, oh, he shot out all the keys on the harpsichord or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're all a pleasure to watch. The musical numbers were all great. And yeah, it was a fun movie.
It was fun. Yay. I'm glad you liked it. Before we close out, was there anything else you wanted to add?
Not that I can think of, other than, I did actually write this down. So going back to the fairy's tale, and I noticed that my original hypothesis was going to be that the tale was a lot darker than the adaptation. And all in all, it wasn't. You have some fairy treachery, maybe a little bit of like pedophile elements. But then you you get to these fairies manipulating everything since before the birth of Belle, before the birth of the prince. And Belle sort of has a fate similar to like, Rapunzel or Sleeping Beauty or whoever who, has the poor fortune of being a fairy's victim, a bad fairy. And long story short, Belle's supposed to be killed at the whim of this evil fairy. A good fairy comes and saves her. And I thought it was interesting that the way she got into the merchant's family was a little creepy. The enchantress goes into the woods to find this, cottage where there's, all these handmaidens and wet nurses sleeping next to this sick baby. And she's like, wow, opportunity arises.
God.
And she's like, look, this baby is about to die. I'm just going to swap it out
How
with
do
Belle.
they not notice?
And like before that, they're like, yeah, Belle's 3 years old, but let me just swap it out with this dying baby. And as soon as the enchantress goes to touch the baby, it dies. I mean, what are the odds? But so this whole time, she like goes out and buries the baby like in the backyard and puts Belle in there, and she's on her merry way. And the family is never any the wiser. In fact, a lot of the wet nurses are like, we did a great job. Look at how healthy this baby is. and you just imagine the enchantress just like nodding with a smile, like, yep.
We're going to take her back to her father tomorrow. How do they not know?
Again, these are fairy tales. You're not supposed to question the logic or the reality. But I was also like shocked, like, oh, I guess, infant mortality was pretty high back then. And she's just like, swoop, I'm going to replace this dead baby with Belle. And it worked out in the end. So there's the happy ever after that we were all looking and hoping for.
Except for the baby.
Except for the baby.
Wow.
Who we'll never know about.
We'll never know about, but would probably have turned into an asshole like the rest of its siblings.
No doubt.
Which makes you wonder, like, what makes you a good person? Is it your upbringing, or is it your genetics, or is it both?
I think we learned that it's a little bit of both.
It's a little bit of both.
Having fairy blood doesn't hurt either.
That's true. Half fairy, half, I don't know, royal.
Half royal, virtuous royalty.
I can't. It's so much, that story.
There's a lot to unpack there.
I think we did a good job. I think this was the most complicated because this is an adaptation of an adaptation of an adaptation of an adaptation. I think we're 4 layers deep on this episode, and we did a good job, I think, of trying to convey everything.
Yeah, I'll be honest. When I signed up for this, I didn't think that the source. I thought it was going to be like maybe 20-page like Brothers Grimm fairy tale. This was like a straight up 200+ page novel with an insanely winding and convoluted latter half, which I think kind of ruined the simplicity of the fairy tale.
Yeah,
the intents of this podcast, but wow, again, like. I think the source material in the second half of the book could be a standalone film, and we could do another podcast episode on that when that gets adapted. But it was just so bananas.
I think I'd be more interested in tackling an adaptation of erotica, of a like.
I'm on board for that.
I know we're doing that. We have to do that. There has to be one based on Beauty and the Beast, or we could do the Sleeping Beauty one. There's for sure a Sleeping Beauty one, which is like really intense.
Either one.
You know who writes it? Anne Rice wrote the Sleeping Beauty erotica. Yep.
Oh, well, that's going on.
And she writes it under a pseudonym.
What's the pseudonym?
I don't know. I have the book in my room. I'll bring it to you next time I see you.
Well, that's going on my to read list for sure. I'm happy to take a break from fairy tales and do some erotica next time, because
hell yeah,
this was a little bit more complicated than I thought I signed up for. So it'd be nice to get some just hot, steamy erotica going.
That would be great, and I thank you for your patience. That second half was brutal. But I think this was fabulous. And so before we go, do you have any? I know you mentioned Hyperion to our listeners. Do you have any pieces of fan fiction or any book recommendations that you would recommend to our listeners?
Book recommendations. I mean, if you're a fan of supernatural and horror, I would say check out Algernon Blackwood. If you also like thrillers and mysteries like I do, I would say jump into the Millennium series, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I've just started making my way through the series, and I fucking love it. It's so good.
Nice.
Yeah.
That would be a good one. I want to tackle that.
I hope this doesn't reveal too much about my personality, like horror and then, murder mysteries.
And erotica.
and erotica. Yeah, those are my top three.
We got to get Ari in here to do a person erotica.
Let me make a recommendation, and I would love to cover this in another podcast, but everyone knows and loves Roald Dahl. He was one of my favorite authors growing up and still is. In case you didn't know, he also has adult literature, which some of it borders on the erotic. It's almost like, it's so good. I mean, he was like a pretty, not devious, but I guess horny guy. And there's a lot of really good adult fiction short stories that he has that all kind of end in this like Twilight Zone twisted conclusion. And it's a kind of a dark erotica mixed with a lot of black humor. And I highly recommend checking those out because they're so entertaining.
Were any of them adapted?
Not that I know of, but it would make for like a good HBO miniseries. I think my favorite work is Switch Bitch, which is a collection. That's right. The guy who wrote James and Giant Peach has a book called Switch Bitch, which is just so, it's just like, you're like, the fuck? This is Roald Dahl? That's just
incredible.
one of like a few collections he has of adult short stories, which are just so entertaining. And they'll make you laugh and squirm and just kind of reconsider what you know about the author. So check those out on Amazon.
Beautiful. And can our listeners follow you anywhere? Are you followable? Nope.
You just leave me alone.
Leave him alone. Stay tuned because I'm going to try to swindle him into doing more episodes with me.
Cool.
Excellent.
I'm on board.
Yay! This was Based On, an Adaptation podcast. I'm Pamela Portnoy. We'll have a new episode out to you every other Monday. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube. And please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Based On Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to our guest, Zach Aronson, for joining us.
It was a pleasure. I can't wait to come back, and I can't wait to see you in person one of these days.
Yes, one of these days. Probably within the next few days.
Yes.
Thank you, Zach. You're awesome. And I want to say an extra thank you to Tiffany Haymoth, Jackson Palmer, Claire Palmer. Wow. Tiffany Haymoth, Jackson Palmer, Claire Palmer, Maya Ashkenazi, Jordan Ross Weinhold, Jason Crow, and Soundwork Studios. Bye!
Bye.